Okay, so this tutorial I'm going to walk you through roughly how to set up a set of views using Rhino, how to generate line work from the views, and then how to compose them in Illustrator for creating multiple diagrams. So what I'm going to do, and let me just point out before we get too much further, if we go to capla.arizona.edu, search for the software guidebook, click on the one and only link, student software, and then right down here under software guidebook, click on this link. You can get to the PDF guidebook that walks you through a whole series of different software workflows. I should also point out that you can download this. You can download this file. This is just a PDF. So right up here in the top right, you can click download, about 20 megabytes, and then you'll just have it on your computer whenever you need it. Okay, and actually I didn't mean to close it. So what I want to do first is I want to establish a couple of views using my file. So I need to make sure I have the named views panel open. So I'll just type in named view in the command line. The panel's already open over here. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, make sure you're in a paraline view. So I just set my world view to top. I can hold Control-Shift, right-click and drag on the keyboard in order to orbit. You can also use the orbit button up here. Okay, and then I'm also going to change into wireframe, or actually ghosted, so I can kind of tell where I am in my file and so on and so forth. Okay, and then I want to set up a couple of different views, kind of at the same angle in my axonometric. I'm just going to delete these for myself. Okay. So just like we did in class, I'm going to go Axon 1. And now when I change to the next view, I can right click and drag again to orbit. And if I hold Shift on the keyboard, it'll keep me from altering my angle up or down. So I can be more consistent about the angle of my axons. Again, holding Shift. So I don't know how many different angles you want to do. You can probably choose all different ones for different diagrams. And I think maybe I'll do like this one, actually, Axon 3. And what's really important is just to get the right angle. Now I'm also going to do a little bit of work to prepare my file. I go back to layers. First of all, I want to trim my topo surface. So instead of trimming the whole thing, I'm actually just going to make a copy of it. So I'll just use the command copy, hit the option in place. Okay, and let me just see what this is on 3D surface. Oops. So now I have two surfaces, topo surfaces here. I'll just make a new layer. I'll call this my drawing topo. Okay. Now if I go into top view, I can also make a box. I don't need a ton of topo information around my house for the drawings. Just a little bit. I'll maybe trim it down to something like that. Oops. And then you can drag it holding Control on the keyboard to only move it vertical. So I'll just have it intersect my surface, trim my surface, and then delete the box. And then actually before I delete the box, I hit Control Z or undo. I also want to make some contours with this thing. So actually before I make the contours, what I really want to do is trim the topo surface using the house, because I don't want there to be contour lines moving through my house inside my drawing. So I'm going to use the command box again. This time I'll hit the option 3-point, and I'm just going to trace the outside dimensions of the house. Okay. Then I'll select the topo surface in the box, type in invert, and hit Control H, or type in hide. Okay. And then I'll select the surface, trim the box, select the box, trim the surface, and join them. And I can type in show, And now I want to go ahead and contour my surface because what I really need are just contour lines in order to show the relationship of the house to the topography in my drawing. So I'll select the topo surface, use the command contour. I'll use the box that I used to trim the surface. Just trace one edge vertically. In terms of the distance, at this point we're at full scale, so I would do like 1 foot. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'll make another new layer, call this my contours, and change it onto that layer. Okay, now I'm gonna delete my box actually. And I'm also gonna go ahead and, well, so the other thing I would wanna do, I should have done this before, I guess, is I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna duplicate, I'm gonna use the command Doop Edge to duplicate, I need a curve basically, where my house kind of intersects with topography in order to get that line into my drawing. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I'm pretty much ready to start, you know, like figuring out how to compose this. So what I'm going to do, I'll go into Wireframe, is I'm going to hide a bunch of stuff because again, we don't really need a ton of information about what's going on inside for these diagrams. We really just need enough information to know, you know, like where views are or how certain, you know, mechanical systems work or whatever. So for example, like all the framing you guys might have modeled for the windows, I can go ahead and turn all that stuff off. So not the mullions, but just the window casing. I'm just hiding it, I'm not deleting it. I would hide these doors as well. I'm gonna turn off the ceiling. I don't need the ceiling. Okay. And then, you know, kind of any other line you might find distracting or confusing. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now I can switch back to my named view, click on my Axon, and I think I'm pretty much ready to, oh, the last thing you should maybe do is use the command select SEL curve, CRV. I just want to make sure there's no like extraneous lines. I would turn off that layer that you traced your plan with, because those curves will make 2D as well. I just want to make sure there's no like extra lines that are going to kind of make my drawing more messy than necessary. Okay, so back to named view, switch to my right to my angle. I'm going to kind of just center and figure out which topo lines I want. That looks pretty good. I could zoom out a little bit if I wanted some more topo lines. Oops. Select a few more. Okay. And you do actually want to select the 3D surface because it'll hide the bottom of the house that's below grade basically. And we want that for our drawing. Then I'll use the command to make 2D. And once again, there's a bunch of options I want to make sure are selected. One of them is maintain source layers. I want, I can actually turn this off because it doesn't really work well in this particular view. So uncheck scene silhouette. I am going to turn on group output. And I'm also going to turn on hidden lines. Okay. Go ahead and click OK. Should take a little while, and then I'll switch to top view. And before I've deselected anything, I want to make sure I can go zoom or Z enter selected or S enter to zoom to wherever my drawing might be. And then I'll move it out of the way of any existing model or drawing that might be in the same place. Okay, now I'm also going to actually turn off my background here. Gradient view, so I can kind of see my line work a little more clearly. And you could even toggle into, in the viewport options, you could toggle into print preview, just so you can kind of more clearly tell what these lines might be doing. And once again, you should have a whole bunch of new lines in your layers panel. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Trying to expand this, okay. You should have a bunch of new layers in your layers panel, layers, under Make 2D. So now I'm just going to kind of go in here and edit some of the Make 2D lines and just delete anything that I think is distracting or extraneous. So I'm going to go ahead and first of all delete all the hidden contour lines that are wrapping around the back of my house over here, because I think those are distracting. So again, because we chose the option group selected, even though these lines might be on different layers and they might be separated already, we need to use ungroup just to get at those particular ones that are back here. And then it looks like we also need to explode the ones, because I still want this part of the line here behind the house. I just don't want the part that wraps around where the house is sunken in. Let me select all these lines and explode them. Okay. And then I just need to deselect these ones over here, delete them. I'm also going to delete the lower line. Oops, again, that's my slab, so I'm going to ungroup that. I'm going to delete those lines, the bottom of the slab. Again, that's not really adding information that's helping me understand the space all that much. I could explode this. I'm just kind of like, you know, this is at your own discretion, but you just want to like remove as many lines as you can that aren't really telling us a lot of information. That's helping, you know what I mean? What is that line? Not really sure where that line came from. So I could switch my current layer to the layer that this one's on, Scoria wall, switch it to that. And I would actually delete these lines that go past where the slab is, so I can trim stuff as well. So the inside of the wall past where the slab is, I'm deleting that. Delete lines like this that are sort of like edges where there wouldn't really be a separation. Okay. I'm just trying to clean it up a little bit. Let's see. This line can go. Oops, make sure I ungroup that first. Oh, that's my roof. Okay. Okay, looks pretty good for right now. Again, I could also actually delete the, well, I could delete some of the lines in here. This is also pretty confusing. Okay. All right, I think that's pretty good. Ah, yes, the slab. Okay. And when I've kind of cleaned it up and gotten it to where I want it to be, I can go ahead and export it to Illustrator. And I'll kind of like select a bunch of the lines again, go to File, Export Selected, change to the type Adobe Illustrator, or under Save As Type, change to Adobe Illustrator. Go down to wherever you want to save it. In my case, that's in here. Okay. Export 1. And once again, under the AI export options, we want to choose Preserve Model Scale. I'm also going to hit this option Order Layers. I'm not actually sure what that does, but we'll find out. And under Scale, I'm actually going to go down to an 1/8 of an inch equals a foot, or 8 feet equals 1 inch. So then I'll go ahead and click OK. Go to where my file is. Okay. I'll open that file. You can drag it in or just double click it, either one. Okay, again, up here at the very top, I like to use the one Essentials Classic. It has the most options, but it's up to you which ones you want, which ones you like. I'm also going to close like all this stuff, just to get rid of. And as I use different panels, I'll show you where they're hidden or where they're placed. Let's see. And okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and throw that on the right hand side. Oops, that didn't quite work. There we go. Okay, so in Illustrator, if you hit Control R, you'll get your little rulers at the top and bottom. You can toggle them on and off. If you hit space and click and drag, that's how you pan. If you hold Alt and scroll, you can zoom in and out. Okay, and our drawing should be in here somewhere. It's way over here. I'm just going to go ahead and drag that in. I'm also going to change the page size to the appropriate page size. I'm going to File, Document Setup. Ensure that you're in the inches. Your units are set to inches. Click on Edit Artboards. And I'm going to set this to 24 by 36. Okay, and when you're done, just go ahead and go back to the selection tool. All right, looks pretty good. And first thing we can see is that our dash lines are pretty, the scale of our dash lines are pretty large. So again, if I expand my layers panel, you can kind of see how they've been organized. So I'm actually going to grab all the hidden ones and move those underneath, just drag them. And again, you can select anything on a layer by clicking the little bubble at the end. I'm holding Shift right now to select all objects on multiple layers. I'm going to change the line weight down a little bit, maybe 0.01. And I'm going to check dashed line, set it to 2, which is obviously too small, I guess. Maybe 5. Oh, I'm entering these numbers in inches, so I need to be like at 0.1 or even less. 0.01. Okay, and we can also in here we can change the cap style so that we get kind of rounded edges, which just makes it look a little cleaner, where you have corners that have lines that aren't joined. Oh, no, it looks like oh, maybe there's nothing on that layer. All right, and I'm going to make this again a little bit smaller, 0.005. All right. That looks pretty good. Okay. Those are nice and light. And then I can go ahead and do the same for my my visible line. So I'll select all of those layers at once. And for this, I'm going to go ahead and first of all change the stroke black. So in my colors panel, and you can find that panel under Window, color right there, you have a fill and a stroke. Basically that means like if I have a shape that's closed in Illustrator, I can give it a fill color, which will fill the closed shape, or it'll stretch between the edges of the closed shape. And I can give it a stroke color, which means the color of the, let me just turn that off. That's the color of the actual lines. I can change the color of the outline. In this case, I'm going to select all those lines and make them black. So I want to make sure I have the stroke icon on the front. Just click on it and then I'll hit black. Change it to black. I'm going to change my line weight to 0.01. Okay, that looks okay. And then what I might also do here would be to give myself a profile line. If I go to my scoria wall, and then I'll also select these two lines and put them from the slab. That's the profile line from how the house intersects the topography. I'll drag those up onto the same layer. Okay, and then I can make a copy of this. I'm just going to click and drag it and hold Alt on the keyboard. You can see how my cursor changed to a double arrow. Okay, and then I'll just delete all the interior lines. There's also another way to do this, but we'll ignore that for right now. Okay, and then for this line, I could select it and just edit it until it's snapped to that end of the other line. And I'll do the same for this one, except I'm going to edit using the direct select tool, which means I'm editing the anchor points rather than the whole line, the scale of the whole line. So I'll toggle to the direct select tool, which is the white arrow. I'll click on that control point to select just that control point, and then I'll drag it over to snap to the other anchor. Also, I think if you don't have, you're finding that like things aren't snapping and like anchor points aren't popping up, I think it's called Smart Guides. If you go to View and make sure that this button, Smart Guides, is checked, that'll like allow you to snap for things. I'll change back to the selection tool. So this line, first of all, I can also hit Control J to join it into one line, which will make my life a little easier. And I'm going to make the profile, I'm going to make this line weight a little bit heavier. Maybe 0.015 or something like that. That's my profile line. And then I can zoom out and move it back over. Okay. And I might even bump it up a little more, 0.02 maybe. Okay. That looks all right. And I'm actually maybe going to turn these lines down because the roof is less important. I'll make that to 0.005. Okay, that looks pretty good. And I believe now we're ready to kind of go in here and start adding diagrammatic layers. The last thing that I'm going to do is, again, I'll select my scoria wall and I'm going to make a copy. So I'll just drag the whole thing and hold Alt on the keyboard. And then I'm going to make what's called a live paint group. So let me turn off my contours. They're not overlapping. I'll select all of those lines and I'm going to go to the shape builder tool, click and hold, and then select a live paint bucket. I can also just tap K on the keyboard. And for this, I'm going to use colors. So again, in the color panel, I'm gonna change the fill of my paint bucket tool as I'm like kind of filling the different areas. So I'm also going to toggle over, well, maybe let me fill it with black first. Then I can click on the little options button in the top right of the panel and change from RGB to grayscale, so I can kind of easily just do a bunch of different tones of grayscale. And then I'm going to change this to some different tones. So I'll start with 40, maybe fill one wall. And we're basically like kind of shading the geometry at this point. I'm gonna kind of fill, so I turn that up to 60, and then maybe the roof would be like lighter. I'd fill that with 20, and maybe even like 30 for the roof. Okay, and you can also now that I've established like what color is working for what direction, I can also like use, if I hold Alt on the keyboard and then click in an area of color I want to copy, like that, I can actually, oops, maybe I'll do something lighter for the inside. Okay, I can actually go around and like kind of copy my, my color swatches. Just kind of shade it all a little bit differently. And that way we get a little bit of kind of three-dimensional definition out of that. And then when I'm done, I'll switch back to the selection tool. I'll select that object. Since I already have all that line work here, I don't need there to be like a stroke weight on this shaded object. So I'll go back over to color, click on the stroke icon, and then I'll click the little square with the red line through it. And now I'm just looking at the fill that I created, not the line work. And I'm actually also going to make a new layer for this guy. So I'll make a new layer. In order to put this object on that layer, I want to have it selected, and then I can drag the little square from whatever layer it's on to my new layer. And I'm going to place this between my visible layers and my hidden layers. So it'll be on top of my dashed lines, but behind my kind of thicker outer lines. And then I'll just go ahead and bring that down, line it up again. And then what I want to do is select that object and change the opacity to something like 50, maybe even a little bit less. 30. Okay. And so there we go. So that's the kind of shaded part. I actually might even edit my line works a little bit more in here, just because this is kind of still looking really messy. There's a lot of lines that are close together that are overlapping, and that's kind of not looking good. So again, just use your like kind of visual sense to do this part, whatever you think looks best. And I'm mainly just looking for these lines where I have several things overlapping. And you know, even though you might say to yourself like, oh well, I need this line to kind of understand where the edge of the door is, right? When I zoom out, it's actually not going to make a lot of difference. I can still basically tell what's going on, but I'm not looking at a whole bunch of duplicate lines that are confusing me. Areas like this, basically. Okay. And I know there are duplicate lines over here as well. Obviously, because each of these elements has a thickness, delete some of those lines. Just kind of clean this up. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's important to always kind of focus on the scale at which your drawing is going to be looked at by somebody. It's more important that it's legible than that it is super accurate or perfect. Okay. That looks pretty good. And the other place that kind of bothers me is this. That looks a little better. I might even delete the edge of my slab. That's not such an important thing. Okay, that looks a lot better. All right, so now that we've kind of cleaned it up a little bit, okay. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the rest of my layers again. Oh, and I can also make these lines actually black, because I don't believe they are right now. That would add a little bit of definition. Maybe it looks better when they're gray. I mean, again, the nice thing about Illustrator is you can kind of look at what the composition seems like as you're doing it and really get a good sense of how things look. Okay, and then the final thing I want to show you is how to do some types of diagram, and I can expand on this again when we meet on Friday. But for example, to do the diagram that involves the views, obviously you'd want to use your own images for this. But if we take some pictures and just kind of looking, here we go, it's a nice one. Let me save that image. So that's looking towards the west, the kind of main view of the house. Okay, and then I would actually even add another layer before I do this. Just kind of keep my diagrams on a separate layer. And you can also lock your layers in here. So this little icon, you can turn the visibility on and off, and you can also lock them. So for right now, that's going to be really helpful. I don't mess up my line work underneath. Okay. And I would put this layer down. I guess it should actually be kind of on top of everything. Okay, and then I'm going to use a tool called the Free Transform tool. If I go, I believe it's E on the keyboard, just hit E. Okay, there it is. And if I use that, now I should have like different cursors for my image. What I would even do is I would like use a use the kind of orientation of the house to line up how this frame looks. Then I could switch back to direct selection, or like kind of line up how the orientation of the frame works. Okay. And then, so that's my image, which stays on top. And then I would go back to this other new layer that I created. First of all, I could make a little symbol, so I would maybe choose the circle tool. I can hold shift to kind of keep it a circle rather than an ellipse. And then you maybe want to introduce like a color or something like that. So we could go back to RGB, or I kind of like HSB. I'll just choose a rough color like that. When you want to use the same color a lot as well, it's useful to have the swatches panel open. Again, you go to Window and Swatches, And then I could, for example, if I really like this color and I want to use it a bunch, so each time I make one of these little icons, I'm going to make it that color. I could drag this up into the swatches panel, and then I have that exact color stored. So I could place that kind of inside my house as a center point. Then I would draw a series of lines from that thing out towards the corners of my image. Again, right now, because I have it set to show up only as color, or I'm sorry, as fill and not as stroke. Actually, it's not showing up as anything. I can go back to the color panel, set the stroke icon, and then change the color. I might go also and change down the line weight, 0.08 or 0.008. I could also go and change it to a dashed line, 0.05, 0.02, something like that. And I think I would actually kind of try and make that layer go underneath. Oh, and for some reason it drew that stuff on my layer with my image, so I'll just select those 3 lines and drag them down. There we go. That way it sort of looks like they're coming from inside inside the house. Maybe I will turn up the opacity of this a bit. Okay. All right, and then you could kind of go through one by one. Oh yeah, by the way, now it's under this object, this layer. I would have to turn it on and off in order to get to it. But the other thing I was going to say is if you want to, oops. I could play around with my layer order here. There we go, that's better. Now if I wanted to make sure that this little dot, which should be on the same layer, still not, should be on the same layer as that object. So if it were showing up underneath those lines, I could just select it. Maybe I'll make it a little bigger so you can see it better. I could select it, right click, and go to Arrange, and choose Send to Back, so that would be under the lines. Arrange, bring to front. Just so we can kind of organize the objects on a single layer. Okay, and so that is a kind of introduction to composing these things in Illustrator. And then I might make a separate video. I would just go File, Save. You'll have to change the file name once you've saved an exported file. You can just keep everything default. So there's my first diagram, like so. And then I'll make a separate video later on how to like compose everything in InDesign. All right, and that should be the end of this video.